All right, welcome to a Rooster talk session. I've got Mo from Dubai. I've known Mo for, I don't know, must be at least almost 5, 6 years now. Mo's based in Dubai doing a lot of corporate financing work. This company is called First Forte. Mo, I'll let you introduce yourself. You know things best.
Thank you, Noel. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak a bit more about what I do, but also give you a general about what's going on about the market here. So, just in a bit of a synopsis, I've covered this region for 20 years, the GCC, the Middle East part of it in my career. I'm actually, you can probably tell I'm from the UK, from London. I'm an ex-investment banker with JP Morgan. Started my career in the late 90s for a period of 10 years. Covered things within sales and trading to derivatives to asset management, also a bit of private equity as well. But I started my career looking at the Middle East initially from London for the first few of those years. So I got to know the landscape here quite well, got to come to the region very frequently back then in the early 2000s. But then the role obviously evolved over those years. And 10 years ago, I then got headhunted to move to the region, to move to Dubai, to work for Shuar Capital, which was seen historically as the Goldman Sachs of this region, the longest track record, et cetera, et cetera, king of the IPOs type of company, which was back then just recently being bought over by Sheikh Mohammed's Dubai Holding Group, post Lehman's, post GFC. So it was a great opportunity to come to the region and have my boots on the ground, especially on a personal level, being recently married at the time, having the kids, everything seemed to be a great opportunity just to see where it takes us, really. So 10 years ago, we had a fantastic start to that part of my career. And, it gave us a lot of confidence, gave me a lot of confidence as well in the first year or two working here, which led me on to setting up my own advisory company called First Forte, as you briefly mentioned in the introduction. The idea behind it wasn't something that everybody thought of. It was mainly driven through demand. A lot of my own network, picking my brain when I was based in this region, see what we can do, in terms of funding, raising capital, structuring things, looking at DCM, ECM type of deals for international companies. But, as well as I do, when you're working for a corporate, sometimes your hands are tied, and that's the situation I was in. Saw some amazing opportunities at the time, but had to sort of let go and pass. But it came to a point where, within a period of a week, I was introduced to, a handful of companies, and all three of them actually said to us, "We'd like you to represent us." And that's how it started. So it was more demand driven that actually took the brave decision to go and set up my own small sort of consultancy company back then. And probably the best thing I've ever done in my life, really, in terms of a career move. I think at the time you've got to look at it, in terms of what, is it the right opportunity? And that's really what I saw at the time. Working with the sovereigns, having built a fantastic book over 2 decades, more than 5,000 relationships, more than 200 active investors in all GCC countries. It seems to be the fantastic opportunity to say, right, I think we can now take something to the market and introduce, international groups, be it from the resources sector, be it from the technology sector, real estate sector, infrastructure sector. So that's really how my career sort of started with the First Forte. In fact, I ended up becoming a conduit for a lot of Australian small to mid-market companies back then. There was no one doing that job in Dubai and in this region back then. And so I took a couple of consultancy contracts, advisory contacts, from Australia, and that's really how it started in terms of the advisory work I did for small to mid-market companies on the ASX. The first transaction that I actually successfully completed was literally within 3 months of setting up First Forte. That was about 8 years ago. I took a rock phosphate company out of Sydney, listed, and we took them to an Omani family office, and we got the transaction done. Luckily, it was quite an interesting transaction because the group in Oman ended up delisting the company out of Australia, and they actually ended up working for them. So the executives in the Australian company moved to Dubai eventually, and because they thought it was an easier place to live as opposed to going to Oman. So it was only last week I caught up with them on a call. So I think there's still a good connection we've still got. A year later, I did something with AIM listed company as well in antimony, and that was with that was actually with an Omani sovereign wealth fund. But since then, the focus, as I said, has evolved a lot because it's all basing it to demand. So here I was getting some fantastic opportunities from Australia, but having said that, I was only limiting myself to a handful of potential investors that I can talk to. Really, not everyone does resources, and I'm sure you can be aware of. So here I was. Since then, I've sort of spread out my wings to doing a lot of things with some very large institutional groups out of the US. As a group, we've grown. A lot of clients are now working for me, which I'm glad. So they've actually jumped their jobs and said, we want to be a part of what you do. And so I've got two guys in the UK. I've got a guy in the US in Washington, and I've got a guy in Africa as well. And Australia, I still get some very good sort of connections. So effectively, it works out because they bring me some amazing deal flow.
We had a discussion as to the current situation and everything's sort of gone slow, and you made a point that you're actually quite busy in terms of scenes. Yeah. It'll be interesting to get your point of view. What's happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't take me wrong. It hasn't been plain sailing over the last 3 months. There's been a bit of a lag to Asia to what's happened here in the Middle East, but not as big as the lag to what's happening in Europe and the US. I think they've probably been the worst affected. But with regards to the Middle East, we pretty much woke up mid-February in terms of realizing this is a real epidemic, this is a real problem, and the Middle East effectively started to shut everything down. It became a lockdown situation here, and curfews every night. So that first period between probably mid-February to I'd say the end of March was really tough. It was really tough, as in everything was locked down, flights were all halted, and the problem is you can't bring clients to the region. We can't go around taking my to the likes of Saudi Arabia and all these different affluent sort of family offices and sovereigns. So I postponed 7 new clients, actually 7 new contracts we were supposed to have in that Q1. We actually put it on hold until later in the year. So it became a very difficult period for 6 to 7 weeks. Having said that, I call it difficult because it stopped the momentum, but it was probably the best time to start business developing because number one, everyone was working from home. So number two, no one's saying that they're busy, they're traveling. Everyone had time. So it was a fantastic time to pick up the phone and say, guys, I want to catch up with 50 guys I've not spoken to maybe in about 6 months, 3 months, even catching up with people who I've done old deals with or looked at deals with, seeing where they are. They had all the time. They were sitting at home. They were so happy. They're very open. We're all in the same boat. And what I discovered in that 6 weeks was these guys have to deploy capital still, the buy-side institutions. They may be sitting at home, but guess what? No one's giving them any deal flow because they're sitting out. Everyone thinks they would have sit in the offices. You're going to go and meet them, which is normally the model, right? You're going to do a face-to-face. The KYC happens. It's part of the investment committee stage. You've got to do at least one meeting. But they're sitting in their homes thinking, we're ineffectively, they could be redundant if they don't actually show that they're actually doing any work. They're going to justify their jobs in a way, these CIOs. So all of a sudden, I started getting calls saying, look, we're desperate to start looking at deals. If you've got any deals, let's start looking at them. Let's start having some calls. Let's start due diligence process. We can do all the due diligence now, and who knows, in about 2 or 3 months' time down the road, we can have that eventual meet, one-to-one, but let's start that process right now, doing some comparative studies, conference calls, etc. Data room access has been given. I said, brilliant. And ironically, the last 3 weeks has been, we're now into, April, as you know, the last 2 to 3 weeks has been extremely active now, working from home. So I revisited a handful of these clients, and one of them immediately jumped on the bandwagon and said, look, let's just go live. So we put together 20 Zoom call meetings in 1 week, which was last week. I'm glad to say 70% of them are at the next stage, they're at data room access, NDA stage. So from a momentum perspective, I'm glad to say, look, we're still back on. People are still looking. People have still got money to deploy. Yes, you're right. Oil prices have slumped. We get it. Things are tight. Things are tough. But, that doesn't apply to everyone. Some people still have, it's a buy-side institution. They're like pension funds, right? Some of these sovereigns, they've got to redeploy. And also, I was just going to elaborate one more thing. You've got the family offices as well here, and they are restructuring their portfolios. So having restructured their portfolios, they are also looking for some newer opportunities. So as well, so it's not all negative. It's also an opportunity as well. They may have lost money. They're still looking for income. Everyone's looking for income that the banks aren't giving. Let's just be honest. So that's the opportunity there.
Yeah, I was just about to say. In fact, it's what you said in that last part. There is that there's a lot of talk about how a lot of these sovereign funds or family offices in the Middle East are looking for alternative ways to invest their money. They see that the oil game is sort of not the future game. So there've been a lot of divestment away from that already. I mean, it's not now. I mean, it's been probably going for the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
And this may, especially, well, I guess the last slump in oil prices may be the sort of the catalyst, trigger point, whatever you want to speed things up,
Especially with the smaller states there, like Bahrain and Oman, their policy from a sovereign level and pension fund level is purely we don't invest into anything linked to oil. Period. Right. So it's anything but diversification. So you're very right, and that's exactly the model that's going forward. Having said that, you've got the very large sort of sovereigns out of Saudi Arabia, but they're the darlings of the BlackRocks of the world and the JP Morgans of the world as well, right? So they're looking for those stamps, I guess, from the larger brands in the world. But having said that, everyone's still looking for income generating, safe markets. Okay, you can call is the US and Europe currently safe and Asia safe, but at the end of the day, these are mature markets. They all know they'll bounce back. They'll get help from states, governments. There will be policies in place. They will bounce back. These are black swan events we've just had, right? These are once every 10-year type events. So people realize this is a recession that's not going to take years to recover. There's going to be a sharp bounce back. The market's already bouncing back. They're up 20, 30% in 2 weeks, right? These are record type of returns. So from that perspective, I think by the time it's end of Q3, we'll be back up and running from an economic perspective very quickly. As much as people are laying off staff, even here, even in the US and Europe, I think people will be getting back to business, realizing, God, we need to get back on it. Especially the airline industries, and that's diversifying in terms of what I'm trying to say. But even they'll be like, wow, we need to be flying again. We've got business to do. Then everyone will be reapplying again. So yeah, I'm a great believer I'm very positive, but I think absolutely this is not like a normal recession. This is an epidemic, and people will learn from it. They'll toughen up from it. Any weaker economies the reason why we've probably fallen this back is purely down to the fact that we didn't have any strong fundamentals in the first place. We lived in inflated economies, inflated, indices around the world, and now people are going to toughen up. People will definitely learn from that and realize we've got to strengthen their fundamentals anyway to stop these sort of things happening again.
All right, Mo. Thanks for giving us some time. Hope we could maybe do this more of a regular basis. You can update us on what's happening in that sector of the world. But I'll let you go. Again, thank you and keep safe.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you, Noel.